3,000 years, 31 dynasties. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around just how long ancient Egypt was a dominant force on this planet. We're talking about one of the most influential, most enduring civilizations in all of human history. So let's dive into the incredible story of how this epic empire rose, fell, and then rose again. I mean, seriously, just think about that number for a second. 3 millennia. So the big question we're tackling here is, how? How on earth did they do it? What was the secret sauce to their unbelievable staying power? Well, it turns out the answer isn't some single magical ingredient. It's actually a pattern, a powerful repeating cycle that shaped pretty much their entire history. A constant rhythm of amazing golden ages and, well, total chaos. It's this constant push and pull between unity and division that really holds the key to understanding their entire epic 3,000-year story. Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off way back around 3150 BC. Before this, Egypt wasn't one country. It was 2 separate kingdoms. You had Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. Yeah, I know it sounds backwards, but it's because of the direction the Nile flows. Anyway, that all changed when a king named Narmer came along, conquered his rivals, and mashed the 2 lands together, creating the world's very first nation-state. And just like that, the age of the pharaohs had begun. And right here, this is the fundamental rhythm you need to get. Historians basically split Egyptian history into 2 types of eras. You've got kingdoms, which are the good times, when everything's unified, stable, and powerful, and then you've got intermediate periods. Those are the bad times. We're talking collapse, civil war, total chaos. So let's see how that actually played out. All right, the first great high point was the Old Kingdom. If you've ever seen a picture of Egypt, you know this era. This is when they built the most iconic monuments on Earth, the Great Pyramids of Giza. And you have to understand, these weren't just fancy tombs. They were massive national projects that took incredible organization and a super powerful central government to pull off. So how did they do it? How do you get an entire nation on board with a project like that? Well, here's the key. The pharaoh wasn't just a king. No, he was considered a living god on Earth. This belief gave him absolute power over everything: the economy, the people, even the life-giving floods of the Nile River. That's the kind of power that builds pyramids. But you know how it goes. This golden age couldn't last forever. The power of local governors started to grow, and they began to chip away at the pharaoh's authority. And then things really came to a head with a pharaoh named Pepi II. This guy ruled for 94 years. Can you imagine? He outlived all of his own kids, all his heirs, and left a huge power vacuum when he finally died. And then came the knockout punch. A massive, severe climate shift hit the region, leading to terrible droughts. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, failed to flood year after year. Crops died and famine spread across the land. The living god had failed his people, and the Old Kingdom just crumbled. It collapsed into chaos, kicking off the first intermediate period. But you can't keep a good civilization down. After years of division, a new line of pharaohs from the city of Thebes clawed the country back together. This led to the Middle Kingdom. And then, after another short blip of chaos, the truly mighty New Kingdom. This wasn't just Egypt anymore. This was the Egyptian Empire. So what was the driving force behind this? In a word, defense. They had just spent a chunk of time being ruled by foreigners called the Hyksos, and the new pharaohs basically said, never again. They decided the best defense is a good offense, and they went on a conquering spree, building a massive empire that stretched from modern-day Sudan all the way into Syria. And this era, this is the A-list of ancient Egypt. You had legendary figures like Hatshepsut, a queen who basically decided she'd rather just rule as a full-on king. There was Akhenaten, the religious rebel who tried to change all their gods to just one. Of course, the boy king Tutankhamun, who's famous for his incredible tomb. And the ultimate showman himself, Ramesses the Great, a warrior and master builder who ruled for a staggering 67 years. And here we go again. You know the pattern by now. This incredible peak of power just couldn't last. The long, slow decline that followed the New Kingdom really marks the beginning of the end for Egypt ruling its own destiny. And check this out. Here's a wild story that tells you everything you need to know about the problems they were facing. Under Ramesses III, the government had spent so much money fighting off invaders that they literally ran out of cash. They couldn't pay the guys building the royal tombs. So what did the workers do? They went on strike, the very first recorded labor strike in human history. The system was totally breaking down from the inside. And while all that was happening, enemies were literally knocking on every single door. You had mysterious invaders from the north called the Sea Peoples. You had Libyan tribes pushing in from the west. And down in the south, the Nubian kingdom of Kush was getting strong enough to challenge Egypt head-on. They were getting hammered from all sides. So what happens when you're weak and surrounded? You get conquered. The throne of the pharaohs, for centuries, wasn't even held by Egyptians anymore. It became this revolving door of foreign powers. First Libyans, the Nubians, then the terrifying Assyrians, and finally, the massive Persian Empire. Now, Egypt had a few brief moments where it broke free, but let's be real, the age of its great empire was long gone. And meanwhile, a new force was rising across the Mediterranean, and it was about to write the final chapter of pharaonic Egypt. And when the end came, man, it came fast. First, the last native Egyptian pharaoh gets defeated. Then, boom, Alexander the Great rolls into town in 332 BC. After he dies, one of his top generals, Ptolemy, takes over and starts a whole new Greek dynasty that lasts 300 years. And the very last ruler of that line? The one and only Cleopatra. Her story ends with her defeat by a new superpower, Rome. That was the final nail in the coffin. But here's the really fascinating part. Even though these new rulers were Greek, they couldn't just ignore thousands of years of Egyptian culture. It's like the culture was so powerful, it basically absorbed its conquerors. The Ptolemies had to act the part. They started presenting themselves as pharaohs, worshiping Egyptian gods, and even marrying their siblings to keep the royal bloodline pure, just like the old pharaohs did. Ultimately, though, not even that could stand up to the military might of Rome. With the death of Cleopatra, that was it. Game over. The unbroken line of the pharaohs, stretching back 3 millennia, was finally broken for good. Egypt just became another province in the vast Roman Empire. So, that's the end of the story, right? Well, not quite. The pharaohs were gone, sure, but their ideas, their culture, think about the pyramids, the hieroglyphs, our 365-day calendar. Their influence is everywhere, even today. Rome may have taken the land, but Egypt's culture became immortal. It went on to shape the very world the Romans lived in and the one we live in now. The empire died, but its legacy, well, that never did.